everybody. Welcome to the Energy News Beat podcast. My name's Stuart, President CEO of the Sandstone Group. You know what's kind of wild in this day and age of data is that people are making numbers up and they're throwing them out there. In the UK yesterday, they're now saying that they have to change their net zero goals because they're relying on data that was made up in just a matter of a couple of days. Well, I'll tell you what, I've interviewed Gregory Wrightstone with the CO2 Coalition 3 times now. And I love the work that Gregory Wrightstone is out there doing. And they're actually saying, is CO2 actually a pollution? How come the plants need it? Well, Frits reached out to me, Frits Buningh, and he reached out, and we are about to talk to Frits about data in Antarctica and what is going on there. So buckle up, hang on, and just enjoy the conversation with Frits. Thank you, Frits, for stopping by the podcast today.
You're welcome. I'm looking forward to it.
Hey, congratulations on being invited into the CO2 Coalition. Well done.
Yeah, that was quite a surprise. I had reached out to Dr. Happer back in October, kind of like a cold call or a cold email, as you might call it, because I had started working with an Australian scientist after finding out the data discrepancies on Labor Day and seeing a very cold, extremely cold Labor Day weekend, and then seeing the Climate Change Institute making it much warmer. I saw an article by Dr. Jennifer Marahasi in the Australian magazine, and she had interviewed Dr. Happer in October on his tour to Australia about CO2. He gave a lot of lectures there. So I thought maybe Dr. Happer needed to know what I had seen, and I went to his university and found his email, and I decided to just take a chance and see if he wants to read what I have to say, and he did, and he even responded. I was shocked. So that's how we got talking.
How cool is that? Now let's tee this up a little bit. You love data. It's kind of weird, but you love to look at data and everything else. What triggered you to start looking in at the Antarctica, and what started your thinking, wait a minute, something's not right?
Well, that's a long story. I'll try to make it shorter. But in June 15th, our United Nations Secretary General gave a rousing speech about solidarity. That kind of went down the wrong side of my intellectual understanding of things. And I figured that 2023 was going to be the year of the climate crisis, whereas 1969 was the year of the summer of love. Right. It would be the summer of the climate crisis. So I thought, well, I worked in data for 35 years. Can I look at this from a data perspective and figure out if this is right or is this wrong? I mean, I don't know. I watch TV, I watch CNN, Jake Tapper and stuff, and they tell me all these terrible things. I'm not really believing much of it, but I don't really know. I can't tell. But I have a background of 35 years of crunching data for the likes of Military Times from Gannett, and I even worked for a couple of years at Science. And so I thought, well, I'm retired, besides mowing the lawn and raking the leaves and taking out the garbage on time. What else do I do? Okay, I watch Barcelona and Manchester City on occasions, but that gets old too. So I decided to dig into the data. So okay, that's what I did. And, I looked at the heat in the North Atlantic first, and yeah, it was there, but I thought it was a wind event. And then I decided, I started looking at the Climate Change Institute reanalyzer with these great graphs that they have.
Okay.
They have a tool there that you can download all their files. So on August the 9th, I downloaded all the files, put them next to each other in an Excel spreadsheet, and
Right.
started, they're like 17,000 records for 6 files. And from 1979 to 2023, that's a lot of data. And I
Right.
started cleaning it up and analyzing it. And then I started looking at things and trying to look at it from an auditing perspective. Now, I went through a lot of audits in my time, postal audits, BPA, ABC. They want to know from an advertising perspective, are you BSing them, or are you
Right.
giving them real data about your circulation? Because that's what the advertisers pay money. They pay money per thousand, magazine
Right.
subscribers. So you got to be kind of like on the ball, and they will turn you inside out and upside down. They want to know how much paper you use, how much postage you did, how many deposits you made in the bank.
Right.
Really want to know everything. So I thought, well, let's take the auditing angle and go look at what these NOAA people and these Climate Change Institute from the University of Maine people are really claiming. And I kind of started adding it all up, and something didn't add up in the Southern Hemisphere. The
Okay.
Northern Hemisphere balanced out. I could see that, if you add the tropics, the midsection, the Arctic, okay, close enough. I can't really make any case about anything. But then
Right.
I go look at the Southern Hemisphere, and it didn't match. I can't apply the same logic in the Southern Hemisphere that I did in the Northern Hemisphere. And the only way I could make the Southern Hemisphere balance out overall, including the world temperature, because the world temperature is made up of the Southern Hemisphere, the Northern Hemisphere, add them up, divide them by 2, you get the world temperature. Now, if the Southern Hemisphere is off, then everything else is off. So the Southern Hemisphere was off, and the only way I could make it balance was to make Antarctica way colder than they said that it was. And I thought, whoa, wait a minute. But I know nothing about Antarctica. I thought Antarctica was as big as Texas, really big, like Texas big. And then I find out it's bigger than the United States, Mexico, Ontario, and Quebec combined. Whoa, wait a minute. So I
Wow.
go take a look at it. That's how I got to look at it. Back in August, mid-August, I started looking at it and following what was going on at the station. I found Davis, an Australian outpost on Antarctica, and it was way colder in mid-July than Jake Tapper wanted us to believe.
Let me share. We were talking right before, and that chart that you had pointed out, is that the one that you want me to bring up now? And you can kind
Yeah,
of.
that one, that's the
Okay.
September Labor Day chart that got me going.
Okay. So this is the chart. And what caught your eye as I'm looking at the chart,
Well,
our podcast listeners, we're
we
looking at
go
climate.
back and to give it a little bit perspective.
Okay.
On August the 27th, which it shows over here too, is minus 29 degrees. The Climate Change Institute has this great tool on the reanalyzer that you can download, or you can look at specific stations or locations on Antarctica, and they give
Right.
you a 10-day forecast. So I
Okay.
looked at the 10-day forecast for the South Pole, Fuji Dome, Dome Argus, Concordia, which is all high plateau. And I looked at all of them and I said, whoa, 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 this is way, way cold. All of them are around minus 70 for the Labor Day. And even some are over minus 70 for the Labor Day. So then I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if I created a model of like 20 stations that are topographically and geographically dispersed throughout the continent, and see if I cannot come up with an average of what it should be like. And then when I plugged in 20 stations and locations in Antarctica, I got to an average of minus 41 degrees. Now you got to know that on the reanalyzer website from the NOAA people, well, the NOAA people provides them the data. They are from the University of Maine. The absolute ultimate all-time cold, according to the Climate Change Institute, was August 10th of 2010 of minus 38.6 degrees.
Right.
I'm looking all of a sudden at minus 41, and I'm saying that's 3 degrees colder than what the all-time record is. How can this be? So that's when I started following very closely at that point. And then on the 30th of August, I wrote the Climate Change Institute an email and told them, you're going to break the record. Are you going to hold a press conference? Are you going to go on TV and tell the national audience that we have a new record on Antarctica? Of course, I never did get an answer to that email.
Oh, sure.
But what did happen the very next day, he made a U-turn and started making Antarctica warmer, whereas the NOAA people had said it was going to get freaking colder, and it did get freaking colder. And I followed all this data is from AWS automatic weather stations on Antarctica. This is all data that you can't really challenge unless you want to tell the University of Wisconsin at Madison that they're cheats, which I don't think anybody wants to do.
Right.
So this data is pretty solid. So that you can't, whatever the Climate Change Institute said was happening there is basically disproven by all the purple and yellow. I mean, anybody with half a brain cannot look at this and say this makes sense.
Wow.
So that's where, but nobody knew about any of this. You didn't see it in the media. You didn't see it anywhere. So I took that data, I stuck it in an email, and I emailed it to 10, 15 people that I thought were climate realists.
Right.
Nothing happened. So after about 10 days, I was getting really frustrated. So I woke up in the middle of the night and I went to GoDaddy.com and I bought me a domain, AAA DTS. And the AAA is a little bit of a stab at science, where I worked for the last 2 years of my career that didn't go so well. And I wanted to call it the American Association of Antarctica Daily Temperature Service or something like that. DTS I love because I use that in
And
my
so
computer
this is
stuff a lot.
this is your
Anyway,
site I'm sharing
So
on
I
the screen.
thought, yeah, that's my website. Thank you
Okay.
for pulling that up. Yeah, lots of interesting stuff over there.
Oh, how fun. And so the website is again AAADTS.com. I love it.
I changed the name a little. I made the name, I can go many ways. I can call it the Antarctic and the Arctic Average Daily Temperature Service, or statistics, or system, or I haven't really decided on exactly what I want to do with it. But I put my 2 exposés on there, the one original expose, and I eventually they buckled under for the climate here. Go back on that CFS exhibits.
Right.
They put that up there. CFS, that's the NOAA model, exhibits a bias over the Antarctic. Now, if that model has a bias, that means all the temperature data from the last decades or 2 are all phony and fake. Because that means the southern hemisphere is off. If the southern hemisphere is off, that means the world temperature is off. So none of these heat records are actually real, because
Wow.
they even say themselves it's all estimates. So whatever they put up is estimates based on last year's estimates, which are then estimates based on 20 years of estimates in the past. What do you got? How many error factors do you have to calculate in? But this statement, to me, winter warm bias over portions of Antarctica. So are you going to call the New York Times and tell them we're retracting the July 6th is the hottest day of the earth forever in the 120,000 years? Have they done that? No. That statement disappeared 2 days later and was replaced by, regarding high global mean temperatures, Copernicus, us, and Noah all agree. We are all in agreement that it was hotter than ever. Now, Copernicus, they put this new model up, Era 5, and Era 5 is 2 degrees colder than NOAA, CFS, but they both end up declaring that July the 6th is hotter than ever. Now, how you can have two models that are 2 degrees apart and come to the same conclusion, mathematically, that is beyond me.
Right.
I don't, I come from a 1 and 1 is 2 kind of perspective. I'm not a PhD or a scientist, but I'm just a simple guy doing data and adding stuff up.
I love this. This is absolutely well done, because I don't understand things that are not data oriented. In the energy space, physics, data, and finance matters.
Right. But from an accounting, if you were to take a forensic accountant and have them look at this,
right,
it would go nuts. But, of course, depending on their political vision of where they want the end result to come out.
Right.
But the data, mathematically, none of this data adds up. You cannot make sense out of any of it.
Wow. So when you were going through this, and just to clarify this, that you were really looking at the hemisphere. Once one hemisphere numbers are off, the whole model is off that you were finding.
Right. Yeah. Because like on Antarctica, like the South Pole, and I've confronted them with this, they put up a South Pole forecast for 10 days. The Climate Change Institute people do. But then NOAA has a forecast for the airport at the South Pole. Now, the airport forecast matches what the Madison University, Wisconsin data from the South Pole. They match. Those two are in agreement. And the South Pole from the Climate Change Institute is 8.8 to 14 degrees warmer than the other two. Now, if you are a pilot and you're coming into landing and it's minus 40 degrees, and the other one says it's minus 28 or minus 30, as a pilot, you may make some different decisions on how to position the flaps or the ice, de-icing, whatever. That could be a life-changing situation. So they are consistently 8.8 to 14 degrees warmer in the wintertime of Antarctica, which is our summer, June, July, August.
Right.
And then the interesting part is that now when we go towards December, that difference narrows. And by about December the 6th, you can see that the model from the Climate Change Institute and my model are in total harmony. We agree 100%.
Wow.
I've graphs in there too. But then in the summer, they're 10 degrees off. Now, how can that be? Is that a systematic? If there is a systematic bias, the difference between the two models should be consistent. I should be consistently off 10 degrees, but we're not. So
a systematic bias is outstanding.
An algorithm. There are some under the hood algorithm that suppresses cold temperature, and you can see it if you look at the graphs. You can see consistently that when Antarctica throws a deep cold system, that the Climate Change Institute dips a little bit and then comes back up. They smooth it out, and you can see it in the data. I mean, wow. I analyze bird data very closely, and births through a record of minus 45 in 2023.
Right.
NOAA says, no, it was only minus 38. We're 7 degrees off. And it doesn't make sense because when I went back and looked at 2001, NOAA and the University of Madison at Wisconsin, AWS, and the NSF at Ohio State University is another place where they maintain data from bird stations since 1957. They are the gold standard. They have all the data from 57, 2022, and they're all in agreement in 2001. The last year they were in agreement. Then after that, NOAA begins to get warmer. Now, the Madison University and the Ohio State University are in total agreement every year since 2001, including 2021, 2018 was cold, 2015 was cold, and they're in total agreement. But NOAA getting warmer, or maybe I should go the other way, warmer this way. That's substantially so. And by the time you get to 2023, they're off by 7 degrees. Now that's a lot.
It is.
Because the Arctic square mileage is 7,700 million, whatever. It's about 4.5% of the Earth.
Right.
Arctic is the same, 4.5%. So between the Arctic and the Antarctic, we have 9%. So if you're off by 7 degrees in 4%, yeah, that adds up when you get to the world temperature. And that's where the things go haywire, because, you know, you're making statements about world temperature, but the bottom block of your arithmetic is shaky, and it's kind of like a house of cards. You pull that one out, then the rest crumbles. It's like a pyramid, you know? You have the Antarctic here, the Arctic here, the tropics, the midsections, then you have the world temperature. You know, you build it up like a pyramid. Now, if half of that pyramid on one side is off, you know, the pyramid kind of starts to tilt.
There's no,
That's where the temperature goes off.
you know what, Frits? Here's why it's despicable. And that's because they're printing money to get the renewable energy so that they can lower the carbon, so they can lower the temperature. But they're manipulating the temperature so that, you know, they're forcing everybody to have higher energy expenses.
They don't want to lower the temperature. They want to control your life.
Exactly. But you see where I'm going with this is that
that's what they're telling you, that's what they want you to believe that they are one, that's what they want. They don't care.
they don't
They
care.
know just as well as you and I that they're BSing.
Yes.
Then that's the only way they can get anything done. But you know, you confront them on this. I went to Professor Burkle is the head of this analyzer project. He put it together.
Right.
So after the Labor Day, you know, I sent him an email and said, your data doesn't make any sense. Your mathematics is way off.
Right.
And he actually responded to me and started giving me guidance and lectures about how great they were. And he gave me academic articles to read. So I went and read the academic articles, and then I went back to him and say, well, you say A, they say B, you know, some of your stuff doesn't make sense. Like he gave me an article from 2010, which was the model upon which everything is based at NOAA. Now, right. You got to realize that the article, I looked at the publication date of the article, it was August 1st, 2010. Now, what I told you earlier is the record was August 10th of 2010 at 38 degrees minus. So right. You have a model that they published 10 days before the record came out. Now, if they published the article, that meant that they wrote all that years in the past. So I asked him, how can a model that doesn't include an all-time cold predict an all-time cold when they don't know that it's going to happen? That model cannot predict that this is going to happen. So your model is BS.
Wow.
He didn't like that. And then I told him, I tell you what, Sean, you have your data. I build a model of 20 stations. I tell you what, there's 10 more. There's about 30 of them. You are the expert. You've probably been to Antarctica. You know everything about it. Here are 30 stations. You pick 20, and then we're gonna do a parallel test. I pull all the data of the 20 that you picked because you are the expert.
Right.
And then we're going to compare what I get for my 20 or your 20 stations. We're going to compare that to what you put on your graph every day. That's when he ghosted me for a month. He didn't want to talk to me no more. He said, I'm not talking to this guy. He looks eccentric, a little old, maybe a little dementia along the way, but I'm not talking to him anymore. So about a month later, I went over his head and I went to the executive secretary of the university main president, and I told him, this is not a good look,
Right.
Yeah,
Well,
you're not sure of your numbers. This is not how science is done. You're looking weak. You're looking disheveled.
right.
You ought to take me serious. And Jason Charland is the guy that was the assistant to the university president. He called Sean Burkle to task, and within 5 minutes, Sean Burkle was back talking to me.
Nice.
We kept talking for another couple of months, and he kept making, admissions of guilt, sort of, until the bias statement came out, and then somebody pulled the rug out from under him, and they replaced that with July was the hottest ever since, and we all agree. Forget the bias thing. Yeah, we don't want to tell the world that one.
Oh my goodness. It's funny how data can be changed to prove a point.
Yeah,
And
they throw so much data at you. People just throw a blank. They don't know what to do with it. They trust that they're being told the truth.
not, yeah, trust no one, I think, anymore. Without, and I think that with people not trusting mainstream media, without trusting, I don't watch TV anymore. I despise watching TV, and I would rather listen to podcasts, talk to real people, talk to folks like yourself, and really make my own mind up. I am not a fan of mainstream propaganda.
Well,
So
I rather listen to Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. I don't like their politics, but I love the music. One time I went to see Crosby, Stills, Nash at Wolf Trap, and I paid a lot of money. I sat in the 6th row.
nice.
And David Crosby started talking. I love him. I love all his music, just not his politics. And he started talking about, turning tanks into plowshares and stuff like that. And I was so tempted to get up and yell at him, David, just shut up and play the music. I almost did. I think I got up and then I shut myself down because I felt it was a beautiful summer's day at Wolf Trap. You don't want to it's their stage, it's their music.
Right.
Don't go there, don't do that. So I shut myself up. I sat down and I enjoyed the concert. And God bless David. He left us this year or last year due to COVID. I'm sorry to see him go. I love their music. I just kind of, but the thing was, back in the 70s, and that's where I'm from, we challenged authority at every level. That's
Right.
what they did. That's what they did with the Vietnam War and stuff. and we challenge authority at every level, and I still do. But the youth today is kind of bows down to authority as if they're gods.
Right.
And this is what's no good. The young people are totally off the page.
Right. Dr. Moore, Dr. Patrick Moore, I got the ability to interview him twice. And I always thought Greenpeace was just a bunch of lefties, a bunch of nuts. And he was the co-founder of Greenpeace. Isn't he great? Isn't that great?
I have a problem with that.
What's that?
He used my image for the cover and he must talk to me about it. I'm serious.
For our podcast listeners, we will have that picture.
Not the resemblance. I could prove that in court. I rest my case, Your Honor.
After talking to Dr. Moore, the man was all about trying to save the world from nuclear proliferation. He's trying to save the seals. He's trying to save the whales. And I respect that. And I'm over here going, well, now he was there the first 15 years. The second after that, they have a whole left-wing group that is running Greenpeace, that when the wind farms offshore are now representing data that they're killing animals, the onshore wind farms are killing bats, eagles by the millions, and migratory birds.
Research on the eagle thing, it's terrible.
It is terrible.
Those eagles are getting wiped out.
And we now have the second order impact of mosquito overpopulations of mosquitoes because all the bats are dying and getting killed by them. Dr. Moore is a rock star. I love Dr. Moore after really getting to understand.
My hero too. And you know what I love about it, and I don't know if you can see it, the poster behind me. You seen that one?
Travel the world, British Columbia. Yep.
I worked in the mines in Canada up in Timmins, Ontario back in 1976. I was a mining student back then.
Nice.
I worked underground in a copper mine up in Timmins. And then after a year, I went on and I went out west and I hitchhiked to British Columbia. And I ended up on Vancouver Island, right where Patrick Moore lived and grew up. And I did a 7-day hike of the Pacific Coast Trail near Tofino. So whenever Patrick Moore, when I hear that story about where he grows up, I did absolutely wonderful because that was the highlight of my year in Canada, hiking the 7-day Pacific Coast Trail and watching the whales offshore and the sea lions on the rocks and the eagles overhead. It was absolutely, if I ever make it fabulously rich, which of course everybody hopes to, I would live on Vancouver Island for sure. Maybe I'll even ask Patrick where I should settle down.
I think we all need to. That area may be the only place that survives a nuclear attack, is what he was thinking.
But Patrick Moore, I think his reasoning, I heard his lecture. He said when, in 1989 or 1990, when the Berlin Wall came down, a lot of the intellectual elites didn't have anywhere to go. What could they say? Their hero or their experiment of socialism totally failed in the Soviet Union, and they didn't have anywhere to go. So they infiltrated the environmental movement and turned it into what it is now, basically a political organization using environmental causes in order to gain political power. And that's what Patrick Moore angle is about it. And I'm originally from Europe. I'm from the Netherlands, and I remember Germany, and all the anti-nuke protests. And I have to say, I turned down a job in a uranium mine in Ontario back in 1976 at Elliott Lake because I read a lot of, stories about dumping the tailings into the lake back in the 50s and 60s, which then influenced the health of the people there, which of course
Oh, yeah.
had happened. But I think we've come a long way since, and
Right.
that stuff doesn't happen anymore. And I think that nuclear power is the way to go for the future. All the wind and solar is basically a waste of time and energy.
Right.
Nuclear power, a combination of, even coal. I worked in the coal mines in Germany, and yeah, black lung disease is bad, and yeah, I got some of that too. But I mean, there's a trade-off for everything. Like I worked in a copper mine. I think Greta's iPhone in Sweden has a lot of copper in it, and she's not throwing it out, for all I know, for sure. And like
Right.
these young people that are protesting, they're all holding up the iPhone. It's full of copper. Well, I worked there, and yeah, that was a brutal environment.
Yep.
A lot of dust, and that's not pretty, but it's a trade-off. There's trade-offs for everything. You try to make the best, do it the best way you can, and I think
Yep.
over time we've gotten there. We've made a lot of improvements in mining, and even like the coal, the whole thing about, like, when they talk about pollution, the
Yep.
carbon dioxide, that's nonsense, because if an engine runs clean, it has 100% carbon dioxide. It's the carbon monoxide that kills you. It's the sulfur dioxide that makes you cough. And then it's the particulate matter that gives you asthma. And those are things that with scrubbers on the pipes, you could solve that problem. When I came into Sudbury in 1976, it was a ghastly moonscape type of environment. When you go today to Sudbury, it's probably no longer like that. It probably has
Right.
lots of green and lots of trees. We've way past solved those
Right.
problems. So to go that CO2 is somehow the problem. No, no, no. It's SO2. It's the particulate matter.
Right.
Those things have been solved. And nuclear power, we are getting much more careful with the way we're mining it, and much
Yep.
more careful with the way it's processed. It delivers much better at a much better price, and it's reliable. I mean, it is totally reliable. And
Oh, yeah.
plants last 50, 60, 70 years, whereas a wind farm, you have to replace it in 20, and then where you put all the junk, it
Eight.
can take it down. Most people just leave it up, and it becomes some kind of a windmill from hell, in the landscape.
Yeah.
The
Fritz,
Danish landscape is messed up by all these.
data matters, and it ain't 20. There's not any of them that are going to last that long. They they become servicely after 8 years. You can't. They don't serve. They are never carbon neutral. Never, because
Plus,
you
it takes a lot of carbon and a tremendous amount of concrete to put them up and make them stable. And then
yep.
if they catch fire, then what do you do then? And then they kill the birds and the eagles. And, I did a whole thing about the eagles. And someday I'm going to put a thing about that on my website. The Biden administration put out a new directive about, licenses for what they call taking eagles. And taking eagles means how many eagles can you kill?
Right.
The license used to call 250,000 for killing 5 birds in 5 years or something like that.
Right.
And the Biden administration said, well, we want to mitigate that. But mitigation really meant making it cheaper for the wind farms to kill the eagles.
Yeah. Well,
so they reduced the cost to 40,000 instead of $250,000, and that was the mitigation. It wasn't about killing less eagles. It was making it cheaper to kill the same amount of eagles. That is mitigation in government speak.
And our government has jailed people that have killed eagles because the eagles were killing their livestock. So, it's like depends on which end of the eagle you're on, whether you're in jail or you're like awarded for killing them, and it's despicable.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you what, we are going to have all of your show notes here, and congratulations on your new membership into the CO2 Coalition. And we are going to make sure we get your story out there. What do you see coming around the corner? And you're going to be watching to try to see what the next move is for the climate arguments. What do you see are some of
What
those?
I'm doing is, I've discovered this trend where I'm saying, okay, we're off 10 degrees in the summer, but when it comes to December, we're the same.
Right.
So I'm reconstructing all of 2023. I'm going back to January and I'm adding all the months in, and I have to pull all the data for 16 stations. It's a little time consuming. It's not very sexy, but it needs to be done. And then I that way I get a graph and I'm benchmarking 2023 basically.
Right.
And I said, okay, what I see for bird station in 2001, everybody was in agreement. There was no off, nothing was off. So I'm going to work backwards from 2023 by steps of 5 years. And then I want to see that, because I picked a new model of 16 stations where I know that I can go back and get all the data.
Right.
Data is from either the University of Madison, the Australian Bureau of Meteorology, or the British Arctic system.
Okay.
World meteorology, data that nobody can really dispute. So I don't have to deal with that. And then I'm going to go back over time, 5 years at a step, and to see what the regression is going to be. Because I'm expecting to find that now we're off 10 degrees when it's warmer, which is a suppression of cold, which I think is the whole gambit. And I think if once I get back to 2001, that there won't be any suppression of cold at that time.
Wow.
That's limited. So I think gradually over time, that has been increased, and they're getting bolder and bolder and bolder in doing so.
Wow.
So that's what I'm looking at. It's very time consuming, but I'm retired.
But yeah, I'll tell you what.
Manchester City only have so many games and they on Saturday and Sunday. I can add Bayern München to that, but still I got a lot of time left. So I'll be, and I listen to David Crosby's, if I can only remember my name is my favorite album, I use that to crunch data. Very, very peaceful, and I get it done. And so maybe over time I can come back and give you what I'm finding.
Absolutely.
It will be interesting.
I'll tell you what, we want to publish anything that we can. And also on your website, it's AAADTS.com. I notice a donate button. So if anybody does want to donate to your efforts to help speed you up, they can go there and do that, right?
That would be great. I would love to buy a new computer with more memory. I have my Excel spreadsheet every now and then freeze the whole computer, and I have to do the reboot like what we did before the show because my screen goes dark, and so then I reboot and I go have lunch, and then hopefully by the time I come back from lunch, the Excel spreadsheet will work again. And then there's this little round little blue thing that says we're working on it. And I've gotten to know that thing very well. I look at it for about 2 to 3 hours a day. It's a little frustrating. But,
okay, we got to get somebody to donate to you. Well, thank you so much for stopping by the podcast.
I enjoy it.